Thank you. I was trying to start recording earlier, but it was Eric's meeting. Um, so the shell scripts that originally did that provisioning are still there and in history. So if there is a great hue and cry that wants that instead, I think that's something we can consider. So out there, if you're trying to work on this Docker solution, just remember that that's something that you can inform us you would prefer. And Caden, I guess now would be the moment too, since there is uh, we already know there's a Git dependency and a node dependency. If you could explain, is that the full dependency set? Is OpenSSL still necessary? Is there a particular version of Docker compatibility stuff? Is that something you have on hand, or is it something that we just need to put into documentation a little bit later?
I would just say that since this is a node dependency, on this project, I just went with the version that the project requires in package.json. So that's probably the measure of things to use, because there was also a thought of wanting to get some of the other scripts like running tests potentially working natively versus working in Docker. I think that's kind of the next iteration, is seeing what other kinds of tooling can we get running in the container versus just running natively or not being able to run natively. So yeah, we can definitely look at this other one, the make cert. The certification, I guess, is less of a concern to me, but there are a number of ways to make certs, as long as you can even roll your own certs. It could be that you have a cert already for your domain and you just want to have that locally. You just have to have your system trust the cert. So, and have it stored in that Docker certs folder, and that's all. So yeah, I think there's a couple of ways to, as they say, skin cats or something. So we can figure out if there's like a better way to do the certs. But at least the Docker part of it is running as is. You just need to have the certs on the actual host machine for your computer to trust that and be able to see it over HTTPS. But you can also run it without certs. This works without the certs. If you don't want to have certs, it just won't have the service workers running when you are developing. And that may or may not be something that you want anyway. So.
Exactly. Is that it?
That's all for me.
All right. Once again, thank you, Caden. Super awesome. And I know that there are other cert utilities. We have to balance our goals of having as few dependencies as possible and also as few steps as possible for somebody to get started. So sometimes that means you've got to install some dependencies that you know work on every platform. And so that's continuously under review, because all that we really care about is that it is that easy and that it can produce those custom domains that are so important. So we can come around for that for more review if you like. Secondly, we have Mr. James, quote, Jimothy, unquote, Kalkben, to show us an amazing thing that he made just totally off the cuff in the midst of the rest of his other work. And feel free.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So what I wanted to show or demo was a very simple Upward server. This is outside the context of a store or anything. This is just Upward doing server-side rendering. Let me refresh this. And this is in Code Sandbox. I'll share this link out in chat and in the Slack channel, and anyone can come in and work this. As you can see, it's a very little dependency. It's just the Upward server, Upward.js server, Express, Node, and NPM. And what it does is it basically spits out hello world, which is usually the first thing you learn for any language or technology, is how to spit out hello world anywhere. But with this, I'm using Upward specification to define the behavior of the Upward.js server. There are two paths here, the hello world path and the root path. So if we go here, get the same message, but if you go somewhere else, 404, and that's described in this YAML file. It's a very simple project. It's meant to help you get started, from scratch, which is a request we've heard from developers in the community. How do we start a project from scratch instead of from Venia? And so this is the beginning of what that would look like. I will be creating a tutorial around this project to kind of detail the different pieces of it, namely, the server.js, using the create upward server to actually create the actual server, and then the mustache templates. This is patterned after what's in Venia, the open body, open document, all that stuff. So yeah, I'll be sharing this out, and what I also wanted to demonstrate was I can take it further, and this is on my local. So this is a more involved version. I wanted to keep this simple because I know people would be pulling from it or forking from it, but this is what I expanded with Orange Start. So I incorporated Webpack and all sorts of neat technologies here. And what it spits out is a Hello World React application. Using upward back technologies. And it's still a pretty simple project. Very few moving parts, very few components, just the app component. Still basic templates here. Upward spec is slightly complicated, mostly because I added big icons, this stuff. But still very readable. I'll also be documenting this in the tutorial about how I created this. So yeah, that's what I want to demo. Have any questions?
This rules. Can you show people how to fork it and create their own projects?
Yeah, there is a fork button here on Code Sandbox. You want to, yeah, I think if you also start editing it, it'll fork automatically.
Yeah, that's true. You have to be logged into Code Sandbox, which is really easy to connect your GitHub to.
Yeah, I have connected my GitHub. So
gotcha.
If you have GitHub, you can access this and fork it and play around with it.
Have you tried placing a GraphQL query from the upward server and getting data back from it?
Not yet.
It's super, we could do it right now, not that I want to float a demo, but it's super easy. So you guys can try. I mean, I would say that if you cut and pasted Venia's upward file in here, along with the Venia templates and the other things that Venia upward expects to exist, it would probably work just right out of the box. So this is very awesome. Does anyone have questions about it?
Got a question in chat that says, to do real React SSR as opposed to MST, one would have to add your own engine type there and hook that up to React somehow, question mark.
Yeah, that is the idea. When you do SSR, you essentially are making a contract between a data state assembled as a consequence of the request, from the request and from other environment, a contract for a data state, and then an HTTP response that includes a string of the output HTML. So the place in Upward where you do that is the template resolver, and the fact that the template resolver supports mustache out of the box doesn't mean that it's a mustache template resolver. That's why there's an engine field. So the idea is, yeah, you have to add your own engine type, you have to implement it, and all that you're doing is writing a function whose contract is upward context full of data to string. And it seems like the React HTML library can do that pretty well. There's an example of that in the upward spec documentation. Do you know how to get there real fast? Show it. It's in the upward spec README, and you can just search for template resolver. Yeah, and if you go to the template resolver section and scroll down a little bit, you can see that there is another template engine option. So this just says there isn't actually an example that works, but this sort of straw man example is 5 lines of JavaScript, which would potentially be a perfectly reasonable React SSR renderer. I hesitate to say this is a full solution because rendering progressive web apps with React's SSR renderer carries with it some challenges. You have to try and find a way to asynchronously resolve the several steps of progressive load so you can get a full render. But nevertheless, there it is. I'd love to see somebody trying to do it. I have often said I'm totally going to take some time and make one of those myself, and then I'm surrounded by people staring at me saying, can you please write some more high-level design documents?
Are there any other questions?
No? Yeah, nothing else in chat. Thank you, Andreas. So we are just about up on time. I think it's a good moment to talk about what the upcoming release is going to involve. And I'll sort of go over that a little bit, very briefly. Are you trying to screen share?
No, I'm going to paste the link in the chat.
Awesome. So yeah, Mr. Kaufman has pasted a link to his code sandbox in the Blue Jeans chat. If you want to get there, then go grab that link. If for some reason it's a problem to grab that link out of chat, then we'll put it in the Semantic Engineering Slack. Yeah. So last item on our agenda is to talk about the upcoming release of PWA Studio. We've talked a lot about what our semantic versioning approach is going to be. We determined that the best and most sustainable way for you guys to continue to do your work is for us to release a minor version to support Magento 2.3.1. The question here is how can we release a minor version when the underlying Magento API is a breaking version? And our first observation there is that if Magento itself were an NPM style dependency with its own semantic versioning rules, then we would be totally irresponsible not to make a complete breaking version. But it's not. The dependency is actually a new and different kind of dependency on a GraphQL schema. And GraphQL schemas, according to the underlying principles of GraphQL and the documentation itself of the GraphQL spec, they aren't supposed to be strictly versioned in that way. Because if you manage and tend to a GraphQL API responsibly, you're almost always doing additive changes, fields that somebody doesn't need to request. So an existing implementation should be left unharmed as the schema changes. But when there are breaking changes, we have decided we are going to create and promote extremely helpful tooling to help you to digest those changes and make the necessary updates to your project. If you are consuming Venia components, our 2.1.0 release is also going to include a compatibility layer so that the Venia components should continue to work whether you're backing Magento instances 2.3.0 or 2.3.1. But going forward, we are probably going to break individual Venia components if the GraphQL schema breaks again. And we're going to come up with a way to do that so that you don't have to keep on doing large Venia upgrades to your project, the same way that you would have to do large changes to a theme that inherits from Luma if there is a change to Luma. We don't want that to be the case, so we're finding ways to separate those dependencies into smaller and smaller pieces. For this initial release, we're going to come out with that tooling and that compatibility layer, along with a few other bug fixes and updates. And we're looking forward to it. It is on schedule to come out at the same time that Magento 2.3.1 does. You should see a release candidate being cut today. Have any questions about that? Everyone's so perfectly satisfied with everything we're doing.
They're pretty good.
Everyone's happy, everyone's great. We're looking forward to a few deployments of some actual client projects and live sites that are using some PWA Studio technology. I hesitate to get into any more detail than that, but it's going to be fun and we're going to hear about it. All right, so we have just a few minutes left if anyone else, again, last chance, wants to talk about something. Everyone is shy. You're right, Michael Stacy. But that's good. You know, shy often means still waters running deep. You guys run so deep. I guess the last thing is, after this release, we're going to be working on a much more strict commit sort of message syntax and a few more stringent rules for getting code into the project. We don't want that to slow people down for their contributions. So it's not like a robot will kick out your PR if it doesn't dot all the I's and cross all the T's, but we are trying to put together better conventions for the format of stuff when you merge it, and that's going to help us create much more exhaustive and totally complete change logs and better release management. So that helps everyone out, and in exchange, we all just contribute a little bit more specific syntax into your commit messages. We don't know when that's going to become enforced, but on the occasion of a release like this one, it's an opportunity for us to talk that over. So we'll be talking to community about that as well. All right. Everyone gets 3 minutes back in their day. Do your best with them. Thanks again, everybody.
Thank y'all.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.